All right, in this video, we're going to have a look at applying other textures besides seamless patterns and how to add effects to them and really get this image working nicely. So obviously we have our texture file off to the side here. I'm going to focus again on the top of this helmet section here. We can drag this below, we can still see the line work there. And I'm just going to add some more layers, more effects, more textures, because sometimes it really does take a bit of practice to get something that's going to work really well for this. So I'm going to go to my textures and actually pick one that I think is going to work quite well for this. And this steel one here works quite well. I'm going to hold down my control button to get auto select up with my selection tool and select that one. And then I'm going to hold down the Alt key. Now, as I hold down the Alt key, it brings up the white arrow, and I can drag, and it creates a duplicate of that. So the other option is to physically drag down and into our create new layer image, duplicate it. But this way, holding down Alt just makes it really quick to duplicate. I'm going to drag that over. Now, I'm actually going to drag this outside of my texture drop down here because it's a bit cluttery. There's a lot of textures in there. Don't really need to focus on all of those at the same time. So I might turn them off so that it's less distracting. And let's just change my screen mode so we can move this over, centralize it. So there we have a nice texture to add to there. Now, I'm going to try and scale this up. You may need to scale up or down accordingly to fill basically where that helmet part is going to be. In fact, I'm going to scale this up even bigger just to prove the point a bit later on. Hit Enter or hit the tick key, and once you've decided that that's where you want to have it. Now, again, it's covering our object, but fortunately we have the flatting layer here once again. So if we take this back to our flatting layer, we can see nice solid colors. I can go to my wand. There it is there. Anti-alias is unticked. I want it really close to the edges, no 50-50. Continuous is ticked, so it's only going to select that red. There's another, say that green there. If I had continuous unticked and clicked on the green, it's going to select everything that's going to be of a similar color. So both of those greens, etc. And also the tolerance is going to be wherever continuous. It's going to work for me. Select on that red. So you select from the flatting layer, and then we're going to go to our texture that we placed over the top, and we now have marching ants. Select on there, and then what I'm actually going to do is mask this off. And masking is going to allow me to sort of make this outside area of whatever selected invisible. And to mask, we simply hit this rectangle down here with the circle in it, and bang, it's going to mask everything up. You can actually see the mask in there. Everything black is invisible, everything white is visible. If you want to do the opposite of the selection, you can go to Select, Inverse, or Shift Control I, and that will select the opposite. Again, apply the mask, and it's going to select the outside. That's not really what we want. We actually want, back to the flatting layer, wand, select that again, and back to there, and mask. And that's really cool. Now you notice there's a little link option here. Now this means that if I grab my move tool, it's going to move that as an entire object, which is great if we want to do that. But in this case, I like where the mask is. I may just want to move the material. So I'm going to unlink that, like so, and select on my material. And you can see I can actually move that around accordingly. I can also Control T and transform, and I can scale that up accordingly, up and down. Great, and I can move that around until I find somewhere where I think might actually have a nice texture applied to it. And I'm going to hit Enter on that. Now, the next thing can run into a few difficulties. This is a flat object, and we've got a curved shape. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to try and morph this around so it looks more curved. Now, the typical way we could do this is make sure that a link's not connected. Let's go Control T and right click and go to warp. And there's our warp there. And this is going to allow us to move our object around and squish and stretch and do all sorts of kind of fun stuff like that. But the problem is that we've only got 9 squares to deal with as far as the warping goes. So we kind of, this is kind of a dead area all the way around here. I'm only messing around with this. We want a little bit more detail than that. So I'm going to untick that. And I really want to make sure that we're just focusing in on the area of the helmet. I'm just going to select around that. And I'm going to duplicate it. So I could inverse select and delete, but it's still going to have some areas outside. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Control and J. And the other option is Control C for copy and Control V. But Control J is typically the quick way of doing it, and it also copies and pastes in place. And sometimes copy Control C, Control V. It's going to move it off slightly. So there should be a shortcut for that. But anyway, so Control J, duplicate, and there it is there. So it's placed over the top. We've already got a mask for that on the one below. So let's actually grab that mask and let's put that and drag it into the new one. Now there's another option for that. We could hit Control and on the mask, and you see that little square appears with the finger. We can click on that, and that is going to select just that mask. And then we can click on that layer and apply a new one. So once we've got a mask set up, that's usually a great way of doing it. And same with shapes once they're established. Hitting Control and in these little picture windows will directly select. So we've created, I'm going to delete that previous one. And I'm going to delete that one. So now we have the new layer, and if I can on the layer selected, sorry, and I hit Control T, see it's a much more confined space to play with, and hit tick with that. So make sure it's unlinked. Control T, right click, and warp. And I'm going to just move this around. And I'm going to push it in on the edges. We're trying to make sort of a more of a curved shape. As it moves in towards the edges, it's going to be more restricted. It's a great way and really quick way of getting some texturing done. And once you've got something that looks good, make sure it doesn't sort of escape. You can see we've got a really nice texture there. And we may want to make this main texture. That's pretty good. Now, if we click into the blend modes here, we can cycle through these and we may find something that's going to mesh up with our original texture. As remember, we do have that before. And blend modes are going to be dependent on the color and the values of the light to dark of the layers below. So you can have a play around with those. Sometimes you come up with something really wacky, especially when you get to stuff like difference. You get some really nice textures. And you can play around with the fill and opacity as well. So you can end up with some really nice setups. Now, I'm going to leave this up normal-wise at the moment. And let's have a quick look at some of the other things we can do with this. And in particular, this is with, sorry, wrong one, the effects panel. So I've accidentally created an adjustment layer. So if we hit effects, we have some other options here. So we did look at the pattern overlay, and we can jump back into that, and we'll notice over in our texture that we have there, it does now have the pattern overlay, and here it is. It's already at the default one that we've created. We could try some other patterns as well that may fit. And as usual, we also have the option for scaling. And we also have the blend modes. So just another way we can apply some interesting patterns, and we can move them around. And we could find a really nice blend for that. That could be quite good. And a lot of this is playing around, but eventually you sometimes do find something that's just going to work nicely for you. And once you've done that, you can hit OK, or we can delve a little bit deeper into the blend modes. Let's just keep it there for now. Let's have a look at some of the other ones. I'm going to ignore bevel and emboss and stroke in a shadow, in a glow for now. And we're going to jump down to the color overlay. So if we click on color overlay, we can actually start off with normal. And usually by default, it's 100% and it's set to normal. So I'm just going to fill that in with a great big color. But we can jump in and we can change the color. We want to go a nice sort of green color, aqua green. And also we can adjust blend mode for this. So all of a sudden we end up with not just a color, but something that's blending into the textures below. And don't forget, playing around with the opacity can really make a big difference. So now we've gone, I can preview that. And we can jump in and change that. We want to go more of a red color, blue, up to you. And you can go in and adjust those accordingly for each option. So that's pretty cool. But there's more. We can also jump into our gradient overlay. So I'm going to click on that. So I've already got one that's preset in here. And typically when you first start, it's going to be set to linear. I've already played around, so it's kind of preset. And the opacity is 100. So this is going to drop in our gradient. And usually our first one's going to be based on our primary and secondary color choice here. And there it is there. Various colors. Don't forget you can hit the cog and load up more colors if need be. It's up to you. It's actually quite nice. And we do have some variants that we can do in that, but we'll get into that in a moment. So now we have our gradient, and the cool thing with using these layer styles is you can actually click and drag and move those gradients around. You have an option to rotate, and you have an option to scale as well. So you do have quite a bit of option to change things around. And like with everything else, you also have the option of a blend mode. So we could change this to something like multiply, and we can adjust how that's going to affect. And let's really ramp this up. Let's change the colors up. I'm going to change this to something a bit darker. And let's move that about. And let's maybe change this over to an overlay or something like that. There we go. And it's giving us a rough idea. We've got some shadow coming in from this side, and maybe I'll change that to radial. Let's scale that up. We do have a curved object, so that could help out. You know what? Let's add another gradient. So we just simply hit the plus, and let's change this over to black to white. Radial is working good for me now. I'm going to change this to normal so we can see where it is. scale it down, and we're just going to get a nice little balanced light going off that. So that's kind of working, but we can run through some of the blend modes, and different ones are going to have different effects. That looks kind of cool, but ultimately I really don't want to have any of the black affecting this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump into my gradient option here, and I'm going to click on the upside slider here with the black, and I'm going to drop the opacity down to 0. And what that means is this one here over the white is set to 100, so we're going to get this nice bright white light, and then it's going to gradually go down to 0 opacity. Now, we can get a little bit more creative with this. I can drop in another color, and let's click on the color. Use the eye picker, and let's pick out a nice orange, and we can move this out, and we can see we can start to get almost a lens flare effect. Now, all of these things are variable. We can create another option here. Let's maybe bring that one back up to white, and move some of the stuff around and get some sort of weird effect happening. And you know what, let's drop the opacity down. So that's interesting. It's not amazing, but interesting. And the cool thing with this, if we don't like something, reopen it, push and drag options that we don't want off, move stuff around. And play around with that. So continue on, apply textures, add multiple textures, and adjust as required.